Facebook Live, and Twitch. This is the Fifth Chapter with Dennis Fithian and Brian Chapman.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state when that light turns red. So don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth Chapter. Brian Chapman, Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spitting the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fifth Chapter.
That's right. Welcome to the Fifth Chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis Fithian. We're ready and raring to go for episode number 46. So let me throw it to Dennis, but not like Chuck Knobloch / Jose Altuve.
Yeah, well, if you did that, it would end up being a still photo and it'd end up in the third row.
Yeah, it hit your little Eastern Michigan Tigers hat in the background as opposed to hitting you right on target. It's amazing how, I don't know if it's a mental block or whatever it's been for Altuve, but he's been one of the big stories of the ALCS with not one, not two, but 3 throwing errors from second base, not from left field, not from third base, from second base.
I guess it can happen to the best of us, man. But, Altuve used to be like one of the most popular players. Now he's one of the most hated players.
Yeah.
What did the difference a couple of years make to the cheating scandal?
Yep, he's part of the
maybe that buzzer underneath was going off, kind of went haywire and made him throw the ball.
Yeah, someone hacked into their system and buzzed it right as he was about to throw it. Somebody on the Rays hacked in.
That'd be pretty sweet. The Rays are, a very proactive organization. Maybe they found that buzzer, and every time he went to throw the ball, they hit it. That'd be pretty sweet. That'd be a great story. I'm sticking with that one.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past him, man. Last time I checked, about 10 minutes ago, the Rays were trailing in Game 5 by the score of 3-2 to the Astros. It was in the middle innings of that game, so we'll probably see if we can keep you up to date on that. I want to thank everyone who's watching on YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch. Also, those that are listening to the podcast via Apple, Google, and Spotify. If you're interested in that, perhaps you missed a portion of the Fifth Chapter, perhaps you just want to hear it again, you can do so. The Fifth Chapter podcast is available at around 11 p.m. on the day of each show. Make sure that you like, make sure that you subscribe, and make sure that you participate in each show by sending in your comments via YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch. And Dennis will be reading your comments on the live stream during the show. Let's take a look now at today's book. As you can see in the second chapter, the Lions are back from the bye week. They're taking on the Jaguars. They're favored by 3.5 points. We'll give you our predictions for the game and tell you whether or not this is a must-win for Matt Patricia to keep his job. In the third chapter, coronavirus cases are soaring in the U.S. Michigan just set a state record for cases in one day, and Nick Saban tested positive before the big game against number 2 Georgia. We'll tell you whether or not Alabama is going to lose that game because they don't have Saban. In the fourth chapter, DK Metcalf. Is he the new era Megatron? We'll tell you who is saying that he is and whether or not we agree with that. And then, of course, in the fifth chapter, it is the major wager. We'll try to get you guys a whole lot of money for this weekend. First, though, we begin with the first chapter. And we're just 9 days away from the start of Big Ten football and just 9 days away from the return of Michigan football. Dennis, of course, very excited about that. The Wolverines are currently ranked 19th in the country, and they start the season on the road against number 24 Minnesota. The Wolverines, a 2.5-point underdog. That's not good news because J.I. Block M. Harbaugh is 1-7 on the road versus ranked teams and 0-10 as an underdog at Michigan. And that brings us to this article by Pete Thamel of Yahoo Sports. He's putting a lot of pressure on J.I. Block M. Harbaugh to win this game. As you can see right here, it says, if Michigan loses that game, a 4-4 season would quickly become the expectation. And certainly if you're Dennis or if you're any other Michigan fan, you don't want to see Michigan go to 4-4. But the theme of this article really isn't about that particular game. It's about Jim Harbaugh and his contract because Harbaugh is the only Power 5 coach with less than 2 years remaining on his contract. Few even have less than 3. And so you got about 14 months left on his deal. He's won 72% of his games, which means he's obviously lost 28% of his games. It's, you wouldn't think this was a big deal if this was the NFL, if this was another pro sports league. But when you see that Jim Harbaugh is one of 64, that does kind of stand out to you. And so, Dennis, what do you think the Wolverines should do about Mr. Khaki? Extend Jim Harbaugh before the season starts. Fire him if he doesn't meet a certain record this year, 8-1, 7-2, whatever. Let the contract run out after this year or next year. I mean, what should they do with this contract? Because it's certainly an atypical contract that he has right now in the Power 5.
Yeah, well, it's very unlikely, I would say, unless there's some kind of off-the-field things going on, that Jim Harbaugh is going to be fired. I mean, that's just that's not happening. You know, the thing about the holes, the hole against Ohio State, not being able to beat them, the bowl record, that speaks for itself. I can make a case for, Jim Harbaugh not being the third highest paid coach in college football. So could everybody else, and so with a new deal, should they just, give him an increase and make him, the highest paid coach? No. I think they could find a way to reduce that salary a little bit, and they could put a clause in there to bump it up if he ended up, beating Ohio State and got to the Big Ten championship game, got to the college football playoff. One thing you got to factor in when it comes to Harbaugh, the years before, the Hoke and Rich Rodriguez, Michigan had 110,000, and they were struggling in a couple of those games to get people. The interest of Michigan football had waned. There was not excitement around the program. Of course, Jim Harbaugh, he came in, packed that stadium, and it's not at a fever pitch like it was for the first year or two, but it's still high, and the stadium is being sold out. So for, of course, the biggest critics are going to point to a lot of different things, but when it comes down to Michigan, most Michigan fans like Jim Harbaugh, and they still support him, and they're still going to go to the stadium. They're still going to buy Michigan things. So, I would re-sign him before the season starts, and I would put in a clause that he would get an increase of what he's getting paid right now by 10 or 20% if he got to the Big Ten championship game and won it. But I would start out with a 10 or 20% lower than his current deal because of the times. It is tricky. During a pandemic, it's very difficult. Like if they came out today, hey, Jim Harbaugh, here's 4 years at $8 million, and everybody's like, man, I need a $1,200 stimulus check. It's tough to announce a deal right now, so I can see how that's not going to happen before the start of the season as well.
Well, I think it'd be even more difficult when you consider the fact that Michigan has already laid off folks in their athletic department. And when you're laying off folks in your athletic department that are making, I don't know, $30, $40, $80, $100,000, and then you're going to give Jim Harbaugh a raise, I think a lot of folks would understand that his department makes a heck of a lot more money, but they're probably thinking, wait a second, you guys are too broke to keep me and my cheap salary, but you can give this guy money and he can't even beat Michigan. I don't think that I understand putting in some clauses for if he beats Ohio State and if he gets to the Big Ten championship game, but on the other hand, think about how different that is compared to the way Michigan used to be, where the expectation was that you would beat Ohio State, and the expectation would be that you go to the Big Ten championship game. I know that most schools do that, but all of a sudden you're going to start incentivizing it. I don't think a contract extension should be in the works. I don't think it should be discussed right now. And I don't think that Michigan should present him for an offer, and I don't think that Harbaugh should be asking for one, because if he asks for an extension, he's going to be doing so from a position of weakness because he's never beaten Ohio State. He's lost 28% of his games. He's lost 4 consecutive bowl games, and like I mentioned, they're laying off employees, and he's going to ask for a raise. Like, you don't get a contract extension and then say, all right, let's start at what I was making before and work down. When you get a contract extension, you're almost always starting from where you were and working up. So I don't see any way that he could look at his resume of losing to Ohio State all the time, losing 28% of his games, losing 4 consecutive bowl games, and saying, all right, this resume suggests that I deserve a contract extension and a raise. He can't get, or he shouldn't get, the highest or second highest paid contract in the Big Ten when he's the fourth or fifth best coach in the conference, just because the school's a big school and they get a whole lot of attention.
Well, it's more than that. Like, all those things are decent points, but the bottom line is that business is really good with Jim Harbaugh as the head coach, and the majority of fans, still like him, still think he's the best coach for the job. They want to retain him. And, the part about it being a pandemic, even if you're one of those people that got laid off at Michigan, you understand how business works, man. He's good for business. He's been good for Michigan. And even though it hasn't reflected, of course, in beating Ohio State, like, I wake up every day and have to deal with, think about why can't Jim Harbaugh beat Ohio State? But the one thing I don't do for critics and for the opposition is I don't get down on one knee and start crying and dwell on, oh my God, they can't beat them. And no, you think about, okay, they can't beat him, and you go on with your day. Is he the best guy for the position? You deal with it and you move on. But yeah, I mean, you understand where the critics are at, but is it imperative, that he has a deal before the start of the season? It's not like it expires at the end of the year.
Correct.
They're doing a good job in recruiting. Tomorrow they're going to pull in a top 100 guy. I think Harbaugh tells the recruits, look, it's a pandemic. We'll get this done. I'm going to be here. I'm not going anywhere. And, they can either trust him or they can listen to people in his ear like, oh, my God, he's going to the NFL. So, because of
I
him
think
being
you brought
the
up
only coach.
Well, I think
go
you
ahead.
brought up a huge difference between the Michigan fan base and the Ohio State fan base when you say, like, hey, am I wake up and am I going to cry about not beating Ohio State? And obviously in the Big Ten, we know that everybody unfortunately is looking up to Ohio State. But I think if you ask a bunch of Ohio State fans, if you lost to Michigan just one time, would you wake up crying because you lost to Michigan? And a lot of them would say yes. And then when you talk about, well, it's a good business decision because the university is making a whole lot of money with Jim Harbaugh in charge while they're losing, certainly a bigger moneymaker would be to win the division, win the Big Ten championship, and beat Ohio State. And with Jim Harbaugh in charge, there really isn't a viable path forward. And if Michigan loses, like, my choice would be to let him coach out year 6 and year 7 of this deal. And if Jim Harbaugh is sitting around on Thanksgiving weekend, after Thanksgiving weekend in 2021 with an 0-7 record against the Deep South Buckeyes with 6 double-digit losses, I think the decision should be pretty easy to just let the contract expire, not fire him, and let him move on. If he was paid to win Big Ten championships, make the CFP, and he's 0-7 in winning the division, 0-7 against the biggest rival, and let's say he goes 5-4 or 6-3 this year, and then wins 9 or fewer games next year, the decision should be pretty easy to just let him walk and then bring in a guy that you hope turns into the next Dabo Swinney.
Yeah, well, the one thing is if there was the next Dabo Swinney where you saw it out there and people could look and say, hey, that's a guy to go after, I think that, people would be more inclined to be like, yeah, let's go after that next guy. But, people just don't see the next guy out there.
Well, Clemson didn't know Swinney would be Swinney.
Yeah, but Clemson was Clemson. They weren't doing anything. Like, they didn't have a guy that they thought could turn it around, that knew how to beat Ohio State, that knows that knows what the rivalry is all about, even though he hasn't beat Ohio State. Like, nobody knows what it means more to beat OSU than Jim Harbaugh, that he hasn't got it done. I think the part, it sounds like a fine thing, like letting it go this year and letting it go next year, except it's going to do nothing except have shows like this constantly talk about. And next year, you can't go into a last year being a lame duck coach. So you have to figure it out by the end of this year. Like, no coach is going in as a lame duck coach. At that point, it does become like people can say, Jim Harbaugh can say whatever he wants. He's going to the NFL after this year. I think the easy part is just giving him an extension. It's finding out when you can do it. And the one thing I think that I believe is that if Jim Harbaugh, I don't think he's getting it done next year, but if he doesn't get it done the following year, I think that he could leave after this year. I think he could leave after next year. There are, like, most coaches don't have a spot that they can just jump to and that's already ready to go. You can be as skeptical as you want about NFL teams saying they're not going to want Jim Harbaugh. I believe they will want Jim Harbaugh. I think anytime after this season, if he wanted to get back into the NFL, he could take that golden parachute. I think he could do it next year. I think he could do it the following year. even if they don't beat Ohio State, even if they lost 4 games this year, I still think that parachute would be there for him. So he's in a position of power. It's like, doesn't work out. Hey, you don't want me here? I'll go to the NFL.
Well, he's in a position of power in that there are NFL teams that would want him. I just don't think he's in a position of power when it comes to negotiating a contract because, like I said, he's
not if he wants more money right now. He's not.
Exactly.
You're right about that.
Exactly.
Because it's a pandemic.
Well, even if it's not a pandemic, let's say they negotiate a contract either before the end of this year or right after the Ohio State game, then he's going to be going in.
More money either. I don't think he should get more money right now. Not, they like, that's a hard argument. Like, I don't care too much about the money, but
yeah,
he's making great money, and for the 5 years that he live up, he packed the stadium and everything.
Well, think about this. If you're Jim Harbaugh, are you going to accept a contract extension that offers you less money?
Well, he should.
Yeah, I agree.
I know,
but do you think he will?
Well, yes, I do think he will. And if I think Michigan feels like that, they've got to, give him a raise because his ego, like, that's not going to make. I'll tell you, that wouldn't make me feel good. I can't imagine that Michigan fans be like, oh yeah, well, let's make sure Jim Harbaugh's ego is pacified here. So, no, he should do the right thing. He should do the right thing. The timing
I think that's like
of when you go about and sign the deal. I'll criticize it if he ends up signing a deal where he's making more money than he is right now. And I think he is still the best coach for Michigan, but I would not get out there if he was like, yeah, go ahead and sign me before the year, but I want a 20% increase of what I was making. I said, we're not going to do that.
I think that believing that Jim Harbaugh would accept a reduced contract is like believing that for the good of the team, somebody like Matthew Stafford would say, all right, you guys can renegotiate my contract so I'm making $5 million less so we can go sign this other player. Not restructure it so that I make more money later on in the deal, but just cut $5 million off so we can get ourselves a star linebacker that we can't afford. People dream about that. Fans dream about that all the time. Hey, he's not that good, or let's just do it so we can win a championship. But players never do it. Now, obviously, the Wolverines wouldn't have to do that so they can get themselves another $1 million offensive coordinator, but coaches don't. I've never heard of a coach signing an extension for less money. It would make sense because he's not meeting expectations of CFP, Big Ten championships, and beating the Deep South Buckeyes, or even winning bowl games. But I don't think that this is going to be the one time where it does make sense and Jim Harbaugh does the right thing for Michigan.
Well, that's where we're going to have to find out because you know what? He's come in and he has been they brought him in to resurrect the program and to beat Ohio State, and he hasn't been able to do that. And if he's like, his ego, or that's because how business is done, he's going to want a 20% raise. Well, then he loses he's Michigan man and everybody pulling for him there. And I think you factor in the pandemic. If he can't figure it out and if he doesn't feel like he can't take less money to stay on at Michigan, that'll be a big time disappointment.
All right, what's some of the feedback we're getting in on this topic?
Let's see. Keith says he does not deserve a contract extension. No freaking way. I am so disappointed in the job he's done thus far. They could at least beat Ohio State once, and it ain't happening this year. I agree with that. Let me see on Facebook. Nothing. I think we're frozen on Facebook, so I don't know. Oh, no, we're not. You're moving around. I blow it up a little bit just to see the. There's Jim Clark who's joined in there. People are not jumping in. We got in late on Facebook. I don't know why that is. So that's it with the feedback.
I wanted to, before we turn the page to the second chapter, wanted to put up one additional tweet. And this is actually from my Twitter account. People can actually still vote on this. They've got 19 hours left to vote. And it's about Jim Harbaugh's contract and what you would do. 37.1% say they would extend Jim Harbaugh now. 11.4% said they'd fire Jim Harbaugh now. 42.9% said decide after 2020. And, look at that. There's a typo because the fourth chapter is also decide after 2020. I meant decide after 2021. Let's just assume that that's what people were voting on. 8.6% agree with me that they should sign him after 2021, even though I put the typo in there of decide after 2020 twice.
One of your best polls. Yeah, right. All right, well, let's get to the second chapter. And Yeah, it's the Detroit Lions who've come off the bye. They're going to go down to Jacksonville to take on Gardner Minshew and the Jags, but the Lions limp into this game. They've got some midweek injury report that did not bode well for them. But really, there's Lion fans that I think want to get rid of everybody, trade everybody possible, including Matt Stafford, and get into the Trevor Lawrence sweepstake, get rid of Bob Quinn, get rid of Matt Patricia. And some of that, I believe, is a reality. I think there's a chance that, if they lose this upcoming game, they lose next week to Atlanta. I think that, really just based on seeing Quinn and company fired at Thomas Dimitroff, fired there in Atlanta. They got rid of their coach and GM. Mm-hmm. We know the week before that the coach and GM, he was one and the same, and Bill O'Brien got fired. It's not out of the question to see both of these guys gone as soon as this Monday, maybe Sunday night. Tell them to stay in Jacksonville. I mean, it's possible. Mm-hmm. Part about trading Stafford, and they might be able to maybe pick up some late round draft picks for some other guys, but I don't think they're going to be able to trade Matt Stafford at the deadline. What do you think?
Well, in terms of that injury report that you mentioned, here it is. It's kind of small, but if you can't see it, tight end Hunter Bryant did not practice each of the last 2 days with a concussion. Adrian Peterson did not practice today with an illness, but is not coronavirus related. Frank Ragnow, groin injury, did not practice. And a lot of the reporters are saying it doesn't look like he's going to play. And then Desmond Trufant did not practice, one of the starting cornerbacks. So not good news going into the game following a bye week. But, regarding this particular game being a must-win, I don't know if Sheila Ford Hamp cares what the fans think and what the dishonest media like you and I think. But the Lions are a 1-3 team. They're going on the road against a 1-4 team that is going through kickers like people go through toilet paper after they go to Taco Bell. And it could be that Matt Patricia is in win or be fired territory because of what you mentioned, the other two head coach and general manager combos already being canned before Patricia and Quinn. And that's based on not my standard or your standard. That's based on her standard, because we both remember, and a lot of the fans remember, that she and her mommy sent out that letter to the season ticket holders at the end of 2019 with that weak SOL mandate that for Quinn and Patricia well, she didn't say for Quinn and Patricia to return, but she said her expectations were not Super Bowl or bust. They weren't division championship or bust. They weren't even playoffs or bust or winning record or bust. Her mandate was contend for the playoffs or bust. That's a really dopey, lowly standard, but you're the Lions, so that's what you got to have. But in order to be a contender for the playoffs or a bust, you got to be probably around a 7-7 record through 14 games, and then maybe you tank the final 2 games. Maybe 6-7 if you suffer some injuries and lose the final 3. If you go into the 6th game of your season with a 1-5 record, it's really hard to see the team going on a 6-3 run just to get into Sheila Ford Hamp contend for the playoffs contention. That's not going to happen. So we talked before the bye week about whether or not it was a must-win for the Lions, and it would be a heck of a lot easier for it to be a must-win for the Lions against the Saints if they had lost the previous game against the Cardinals. But it's extremely improbable that you can go on a 6-3 run when you're a 1-4 team. So this might be the first time when Lions fans are thinking, all right, this could be a win or be fired game. I'm going to call for Quinn and Patricia to be fired either way, because I've been calling for it since the end of Patricia's first year. But this could be the first realistic scenario if they don't win.
Yeah, you're making me laugh going through all that stuff. I mean, it sounds like it could be like through some previous regimes here. The one thing I've seen from Patricia here almost these last 2 weeks, he's saying like these nonsensical things that, that you should look at. They don't make any, none of them, they don't make sense.
He said today they need to backtrack.
Yeah, that didn't make sense to me. None of it right now is making any sense. I don't know if we just go on the playoff contention when they get eliminated, or it just looks like they've got to like win out. So nobody's going to be like, oh boy, we sure wished, like, even like the Uber Lion fans, I don't see them sitting around, talking about, well, these guys just need time, or let's let them go all the. No, I think they say things like that about Stafford. I've seen some of that, let's not trade him away, because there's a lot of the fans that love Stafford.
Yeah.
But I don't see anybody going to bat. I haven't seen one person go to bat for Matt Patricia or Bob Quinn. Not one Lions fan.
Yeah, I think that these first 4 games, what they've done is they've gotten all the slappies off of the bandwagon for Quinn and Patricia, because there are always slappies that are there thick and thin. Hey, it's only been 2 games, only been 3 games, and we've had injuries, but you're 1 and 3 through 4 games. And then, of course, you got Terry Bradshaw, as we talked about on Tuesday, saying that Matt Patricia can't coach a lick. And it gets people to say, you know what, if the national media can't even stand up for our guy, and they're always giving the coaches the benefit of the doubt, then maybe it's time to jump off the bandwagon. And in terms of the game on Sunday, as we mentioned, Ragnow not expected to play. Who knows about Adrian Peterson? That hurts their chances. I mean, are you picking the Lions to beat the Jaguars?
No. I mean, why would I pick it? Like, the schedule gets really soft here, and they can get back. You start getting to the hard part is you start getting into past seasons where, like, and things creep into your mind like, oh, well, this would be just like the Lions, or, hey, if you think they're going to win, that's when you pick them to lose, and vice versa. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm not going to fall into that Lions trap like, oh, yeah, like, this is the Lions logic. I know. One thing I know about the Lions is that I know going in, they kind of drive you a little crazy, and you got to be a little bit insane, like, to watch their games all the time, because the franchise is just run so Mickey Mouse, like my shirt.
Oh.
So I think that the Jags being at home, and I think Minshew is, somebody that can have a field day against this Lions defense. Like, I thought that Murray was going to kill the Lions. I didn't think there was any way that the Lions defense would be able to stop him. And they did it, but the other 3 games, not so much. So I would say that from all of the evidence here, Minshew has a big day and the Lions lose.
Yeah, I'm going to go with, you can call it Lions logic or whatever, but I'm going to pick the Lions to win for a few reasons. First of all, the Jacksonville Jaguars are a bad team, and if the Lions are going to win, they're not going to beat a good team. And for them to beat the Cardinals...
They're a bad team.
Yes.
That's not bad logic. They are a bad team. I'm with you on that one.
And it took 3 interceptions.
2 bad teams.
Yeah, exactly. 2 bad teams. One's got to win unless they tie. But second of all, Patricia does some of his best coaching after a bye. That's when his rocket scientist brain starts to work. In his first year, they won against the Dolphins. In his second year, they lost by 1 point on a last-second field goal to the Packers. So this is Patricia time. Third of all, this is the Patricia push. This is why I didn't say it on the 5th chapter, but I did say it on my radio show a couple days later. I flipped and I said I had the Lions beating the Saints. I was wrong about that. But this is when the Lions have that Patricia push, because he's a bad coach who gets worse as the season goes along. Each of the first 2 years, he's gotten them to 500 after 6 or 7 games. They were 3-3 after 6 games his first year. They were 3-1 after 7 games in his second year. And that's when you get the slappies on board, when that Patricia push gets going. And they could be 3-3 after 2 more games. And then they could tank down the stretch like they had the previous couple years. And then the fourth reason is the Jaguars only have 5 sacks through 5 games. Yes, it's going to hurt if Ragnow doesn't play, but if they can't get much pressure on Matt Stafford, then he could win potentially a shootout, because the Lions aren't going to play any defense. He could win a shootout against the Jaguars to get the slappies back on board as that Patricia push begins.
Yeah, Mike on Facebook, I don't think he's a slappy following his comments over the years on the Lions, but he says it is definitely a must-win situation for Patricia. Well, Mike, you might think so. Like, we just talked about that. I know you just joined in. Like, you think it's a must-win, but, if we're just going on that playoff contention edict, they're not out of the playoffs yet. They could wait, but, you don't really know that. And since we've seen 2 other GMs and coaches already get canned, it could be. And it should be. And nobody's gonna say, oh, man, this was short. Nobody's going to say this was a quick trigger, by Sheila Ford Hamp. Everybody can say that's completely understandable. So I'm with you on that. We get some more feedback from Keith, who says the Lions beat the Packers in that the meaning of the game was only to mess up their draft slot, which is so typical of what they've done over the years that I've watched. I think the Jags are going to beat the Lions, and it's not because I hate the Lions, which I do, but the fierce pass rush led by the kid drafted in the first round 2 years ago who should have been a Lion.
Like I said, 5 sacks in 5 games for the Jaguars this year. I mean, now would it surprise me if a guy who hasn't performed well has a breakout game against the same old Lions? No, that wouldn't shock me at all. But so far, so bad for the Jaguars pass rush.
Yeah, I didn't think of that little nice, neat. It's a good point, Keith. Like, remember the Lions won that game, and all the fans were talking about a springboard for the following year, and they fell down in the draft, and then that pass rusher from Kentucky.
Josh Allen, right?
Yeah, Josh Allen fell into the laps of the Jags there, and the Lions were 1 pick away. If Josh Allen comes out and has a gigantic day, that would feel so much like, and the Lions book of going through and all of the different things that have happened, that really fits right into their profile, Keith. That's a good point.
Especially if he bull rushes T.J. Hawkinson to get to the quarterback, because who did the Lions draft at number 8? A freaking tight end.
Yeah, we're really writing the story here. I can see all those things happening.
All right,
I can see it all happening.
Let's turn the page now to the 3rd chapter, and that gets us back to a topic that, nobody likes to talk about, but it's the most important topic of 2020, and that's the coronavirus pandemic. Scientists have been warning about a second wave in the fall for months, and it's the fall, and the second wave of the coronavirus appears to be here. We saw the cases drop from the summer to down about 35,000 per day, which is still very high. Then they've been rising over the last couple of weeks. Yesterday, America had over 59,400 new cases, the highest one-day total since early August. Hospitals are filling up in Wisconsin. Wyoming had a positivity rate of 40% yesterday. South Dakota, Iowa, some other heartland states have positivity rates over 20%. And we had some really bad news in Michigan that just broke over the last few hours. I'll put it up on the screen for you so you can see. Michigan reports 2,030 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 on Thursday, its highest daily count yet. And let's not forget that back in March and April, the biggest epicenter in the country was in the New York City area. The second biggest epicenter was in the Detroit area, including the state of Michigan. And despite that, the highest COVID-19 case was reported, or case count was reported today. Additionally, and we'll get back to more on how that's affecting our society as a whole in a minute, but the coronavirus is also affecting SEC football. Just days after Florida's coach begged the university to pack the stands with 90,000 fans for their game this weekend against LSU, Florida paused all football operations because 21 players tested positive. Their game against LSU postponed. The biggest game of the college football season is going to be on Saturday when number 2 Bama hosts number 3 Georgia. And the guy that you see up there, Nick Saban, he's not going to be coaching because he tested positive yesterday. We've got an update, actually, from Brett McMurphy of Stadium. And here's his tweet. It says, Coach Saban was evaluated by our team physician, Dr. Jimmy Robinson. Today, Coach Saban remains asymptomatic at this point and is doing fine. He's continuing to self-isolate and will remain in the SEC testing protocol while being evaluated daily. But as part of that protocol, he's not going to be coaching. Dennis, with this news, are you going to give the edge to Georgia in this matchup against Alabama on Saturday, which is taking place in Tuscaloosa?
There's a couple of things that, no, I don't think so. I still think it's going to be Bama, although they got some things to sort out on their defense. I believe that they're going to let Saban still have communications, although they haven't yet got the green light on that, at least of what I've seen. There's some rule about being able to communicate outside the stadium or something. But look, with COVID, you would think that they would allow Saban to have a headset on in his basement and communicate with Steve Sarkisian, and once they do that, look, the head coach, it's important to have the head coach down. He's the one that, is giving the signal when to, go for it and not punt and all those. So he'll be able to do that from his basement. How important is it at the halftime to be able to look guys in the eyes it could be important, but mostly it's about a game plan, and preparing them, getting them ready to go, and then, having that in place. But, not having them down there, could they lose a little bit of their swagger? I think if he was gone in one game, I think it'll have a positive effect for the team. They'll win one for coach. He'll still be able to have his effect on anything if it's a big-time in-game adjustment or something like that, or a big call that he wants Sark, to go for or something. He should be able to relay that signal. And I don't think Kirby Smart is going to be over there on the sidelines, always going so crazy and everything else. Do I think he's going to be emboldened because, Saban's not going to be on the other sideline? I don't, but I do worry a little bit about Saban's defense, who got rolled up so much last week. But their offense looks awesome.
Yeah.
So this is really, really good offense against Kirby Smart's really good defense. And, there are going to be fans there at Bama. If it was between the hedges, I think I'd be ready to, pull the trigger there for the Dogs. But I'm going to pick the Tide here in this one.
Well, in terms of the ability to communicate, I don't think that they should be able to have Saban communicate. I mean, he hired these assistants, these high-powered, highly paid assistants for a reason, and he should be able to trust his assistant coaches to get through one game. Is it the biggest game of the year? Yes, but I don't think that he should be able to communicate. Second of all, if he's watching the game on TV from home, then there's going to be a delay. It's not like he's going to watch it instantaneously. By the time he sees the play, they're on to the next one or the one after that. So being able to say, hey, we should go for it right now, Sarkisian could say, yeah, we just punted. I mean, there's no point in doing that. In terms of the actual game, I was leaning toward Georgia winning this game before I heard about Nick Saban's coronavirus test, just because of the fact that Alabama hasn't played good defense so far to start this year. You mentioned the last game when they gave up 48 points to Ole Miss. They still outscored them by 15, but they gave up 24 at home to Texas A&M. They gave up 19 to Missouri, although 16 were in the second half. They've obviously got the weapons to win a shootout, but I think that with the way Georgia's been playing defense, shutting out Tennessee in the second half, holding them to -1 rushing yards. I think that not having Nick Saban on the field to whatever halftime or in-game adjustments he could do. Let's not forget, he was the guy that made the halftime in-game adjustment to go with a true freshman in Tua Tagovailoa and bench his Heisman Trophy finalist in Jalen Hurts in the middle of the national championship game. They're not going to have that in a guy in Steve Sarkisian who got fired from USC. I give the edge to Georgia. I expect them to win this game.
It's a good point about the relay. I think, I don't know this, and I don't know how far Saban lives away from Bryant-Denny Stadium or anything, but you would think with the technology that they would be able to hook up some kind of direct satellite so he could get a live feed for the game. I'm not sure about that, though. And I'm not sure that Saban has been pretty adamant and kind of out in front. He should be. He's the most visible coach and the most decorated in college football history. It's not like he's been like Dan Mullen talking about let's pack the stadium and we don't care about masks. He's been the exact opposite of that. He seems like he's been very reasonable and smart that way. So I don't know if he would leave his home where he's supposed to be isolating to go to a trailer out in the parking lot or something where he could get a live feed. And
trust the assistants.
People talked about putting him in a deer blind, like a bubble. That was, or up in a suite. I don't think any of those things are happening outside the stadium. Even that's probably not a good look. But do I think he can get a live feed? You're talking about trust the assistants. You're also it's a pandemic. Saban didn't do anything wrong here. He ended up getting the coronavirus.
That's fine.
Help him out. All the things you say about the assistants are fine. But if you can give him a live feed, and it's not like even if they don't give him a live feed, which I think they will, or if it's just not able to happen, which, maybe it wouldn't be able to. I think that if he watches the game, he should be able to fire off a text to Sark, about something if he wants to.
Well, maybe during a timeout, but you say it's a pandemic. I say it's a pandemic. Stay your ass at home and watch the game on TV and just try to get yourself healthy. Don't worry about coaching the game. I mean, does he need to increase his stress level by making in-game adjustments when the coronavirus is hopefully it's not going to wreak havoc on his body, but you just never know. The other part to this chapter is, of course, what's happening nationally with the coronavirus. Like I said, almost 60,000 cases yesterday. A month earlier, we had just 37,000. 2 weeks ago, just 42,000 cases nationally. These are monster leaps. And in sports, of course, we're seeing college games get postponed or canceled. Pro games get postponed. We're seeing hospitals fill up. And we're not seeing enough people wearing masks. I think we're probably headed for more restrictions and potentially some lockdowns, because these numbers aren't just going up by 1,000 or 2. We're talking about 10 and 15,000 over the course of a couple of weeks. It's starting to get scary very quickly.
Well, it feels like it's the summer, again. I saw Fauci today. I just saw the headline where he was suggesting that maybe folks should just stay home for Thanksgiving and, not have the family, gather. Of course, the first 10 comments that I read were all calling him a fraud, and that they were going to listen to him, that they were going to go ahead and see their family. And it's like, the first time I was waiting for the first one to say, you know what, I can be all right, one Thanksgiving, not out of the first 10. They were all like, nope.
Yeah.
I'm having Thanksgiving dinner. You can stay home by yourself, doctor. So, no, they weren't really responding well to a possible Thanksgiving by yourself a message from the doctor.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that, but you want to kill all your relatives or be killed by your relatives. And, from a Big Ten perspective, the season starts in 9 days, and 9 days ago we had 42,000 cases. Now we got 59,000 cases. What's it going to look like 9 days from now? Over 70,000? And then when you see that it's places like Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Iowa that have the numbers going up, when you see Michigan had its all-time record today, that could seriously affect the viability of the season. And you think about 16 days from now, that's a huge day for the Big Ten East, when Michigan is supposed to play Michigan State, when you got the Big Ten East championship game between Penn State and Ohio State. 16 days from now, if the numbers keep going up like this, we could have 70, 80, 90,000 cases per day. The only way that they could play could be if President Trump forces the conference to play, potentially.
Yeah, well, just think about that Thanksgiving weekend. You don't really need your family over there. Michigan will be feasting on Penn State coming up on that Saturday. So, something to be able to look at there.
If they play, yeah.
Yeah, if they play. You sound a little bit like a Corona bro there.
What's a Corona bro?
You'll have to look that up.
Oh.
You'll have to look that up. It's a name for the media.
Oh, for someone that's always talking about the negative coronavirus stories and pointing out what the scientists are saying.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You got it in a nutshell. They're labeled Corona bros.
I don't like it either, but we're just pointing out the facts. The facts don't look good right now. All right, let's turn the page.
Corona chap, Corona bri. There's got to be something in there. Oh, you ready to turn the chapter?
Yeah, unless you want to get to some feedback.
I agree with Chap. As dumb owners don't care as long as they finish around 500. I think that was that was about the Lions here.
Yep.
All right. Yep. Let's go to the next chapter.
Yep, the fourth chapter.
And that gets us to the next Megatron, the next Calvin Johnson. I know who this player is. Very familiar with his game in college and then in the draft, and then blew up in the playoffs last year. But it wasn't until today when I saw his teammate Jamal Adams throw up this tweet that I thought, is DK Metcalf the next Megatron?
Yeah.
What do you think?
And I put up the tweet so everybody can see it, and he says, DK is the new era Megatron. I'm not arguing with anybody. Have a great Tuesday. That's, like you said, from his teammate Jamal Adams. And I just realized this just now. Jamal Adams' Twitter handle is @Prez, @Prez. I would assume that somebody would have taken that Twitter handle before Jamal Adams got it. I mean, whether it was the old school rapper Prez or a president of a company or the president of the United States. But anyway, that's kind of weird. Is he the new era Megatron? Look, I never thought about this comparison before seeing this tweet, but I think he has a chance to be that, because you have to think about why Calvin Johnson was called Megatron. It wasn't just because he was a good receiver. It was because he was taller, faster, and stronger than anybody else, and he could jump extremely high. Calvin Johnson, 6'5", 438 or 4.38 40-yard dash at the combine, and a 42.5-inch vertical leap. DK Metcalf, very similar, 6'4", 4.33 second 40-yard dash, a 40.5 vertical leap, and had 27 bench press reps. And if you're wondering just how ripped this guy is, that's him right there. See with like that's not even a 6 or an 8. That's like a 16 pack abs, and those pectoral muscles look like they could be, from a bodybuilder competition. So you look at all that information, all those comparisons. Only thing else he has to do is produce like Megatron. And in his second year, 496 yards, 5 touchdowns in 5 games. He's on pace to be just under 1,600 yards with 16 touchdowns. And then the next challenge would be, perhaps in a couple of years, could he challenge Megatron's single-season yardage record and get to 2,000?
You know what? The picture that you put up there of DK Metcalf, that's the one where he's with his teammates at Ole Miss and they're in the weight room.
Yeah.
It like that picture says a lot. I mean, you can see his build there, but
Jeez.
His teammates are with him there, and they're all like a foot shorter than he is, and they're all like, they're football players. They all have really good builds and everything. But then you just look at Metcalf, you're like, oh my God, like it's just the physique part is just amazing. There were some people. Chris Collinsworth says it a number of times, and he did this past Sunday. He compared him to Jerry Rice. Like they think DK Metcalf.
Jerry Rice didn't look like that.
Well, he didn't, but Chris Collinsworth couldn't believe that he fell to the second round. He said that a lot last year. Mm-hmm. He had that great playoff game, and he's off to a great start here. The knock on him was that he could only run one route, and that was a go route, and he couldn't do all the other routes on the tree. I don't know if he's been able to work. I think that's something that you could work on, route running. It doesn't mean like you can only round off, you can only run and just, throw bombs to him. So maybe he can work on that a little bit. With Collinsworth talking about him being the next Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice was like the best route runner, so I didn't really see that comparison. But I know going all the years of going down to those Lion practices, and you just sit there and you see them all out there on the field, and then you look out there and you look over the wide receivers, and there's a guy that's a helmet taller than everybody else, and then he looks like he's a defensive end that's standing over there with the wide receiving group, and then they start throwing footballs to him, and he catches everything. It was like Calvin Johnson looked amazing out on the practice field. He took it a lot of the times, most of the times, to the field, and one day he'll be in Canton as a Hall of Fame wide receiver. He
should be a first ballot Hall of Famer, if you ask me. And the other thing,
he won't be though.
I hope that you're wrong.
If Moss and Owens can't get in on the front, like he's a Hall of Famer, but and I think he should get in. It would be great because I'm trying to get there to watch Charles Woodson be inducted this year, and I'd love to see Kelvin in there too. A big fan, but I just don't think that's going to happen.
Well, the other thing about DK Metcalf and the comparison to Calvin Johnson is that with Calvin Johnson, Matthew Stafford had his best statistical years, and now in his second year, guess who's having his best statistical year as quarterback? Russell Wilson. It took a week or two before everybody said, hey, guess who's the front runner for the MVP? Is it already over? And who's he throwing the football to? That guy, DK Metcalf.
Keith says Metcalf should be a Lion, but they drafted Tavai. That's a tough one, Keith. That's a tough one. They could have played DK Metcalf at linebacker.
Yeah, same old Lions, that's for certain. All right, let's turn the page to the fifth chapter. That gets us to the major wager, where we try to make you guys a little bit of money out there. Give you some gambling picks perhaps for tonight's final baseball game, or perhaps this weekend for some college and pro football. Dennis, what are you looking at?
What's the line of that tied game? How many points?
It's Georgia plus 4.5. Georgia plus 4.5. I'm going to bet Bama, but just put a low number on it. 25. Okay. Tuesday was a good night for me because I had the Rays to cover the 1.5 run line, and they did at plus 145, so that was nice. Tonight, I got the Dodgers. They're starting Kershaw after he was crashed in Game 2. Hopefully it won't pop up again. But the Braves are starting Bryce Wilson. He has a career ERA close to 6, a career whip over 1.8. This year his whip was a little better at 1.72. And so I think that it's pretty safe to pick the Dodgers minus 1.5 at only minus 155. Saturday, I take Georgia plus 4.5. So Dennis and I are on opposite sides. Like I said, I think Georgia will win straight up. But if you're going to give me 4.5 points with Saban out, I'll take that. And then Sunday, how about Vikings minus 4 against the Falcons? I like that one for Sunday.
You're loading up. Well, we don't have to go very far if we want to find a bet, with the Alabama-Georgia game. We'll work on that. We'll have to we'll put something on the line for that game coming up on Saturday. All right, Chap, I like the Dodgers pick. I think they're going to win as well. Mm-hmm. That's going to do it. Keith, you were on fire in the chat. Never seen Chapman laugh so much during a show. Hey, Sideshow Raj getting in. What's up? Round or deep dish, he says. Either one, man. I'm good. Give me round, though.
I'll go round as well.
All right. We will be back on Tuesday. Hopefully, things look a little bit better for both pro and college football. And will we be...
And coronavirus.
Well, that's what I meant. It'll be game week.
Yes, it will be.
Game week for the Big Ten. So we'll be fired up about that. We'll be talking about the Big Ten and it being game week coming up on Tuesday. Thanks for watching here for Brian Chet.
The Fifth chapter. Chapman gets to talking sports, but people can't wait. He represents the mid. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fifth chapter.